Okay, Kevin, we just talked about the stress, how to handle them, and if it is within our control, then we can try to do the best we can. So then what about the stress that we can't control and they keep coming to us, but we still have to perform, right? We need to maintain a certain level of performance so that our job won't suffer, the outcome won't suffer. And especially like people at the management level, there are a lot of factors that they can't control and they will be getting a lot of stress. So how do people perform under stress, or how to thrive despite a lot of stress?
Okay, so you talk about management. Maybe I want to just introduce a more close to home category of, let's say, a salesperson. Um, you know, maybe insurance or real estate, which is also high pressure because without making sale, you don't eat, right? And let's say the element that are outside of your control is the market. Market is impacted by many things, government policy, general economic conditions. And so for those things that you can control, let's assume that you have done a reasonable job. So your knowledge, your relationships, your mindset, you think you are doing reasonably, you're making progress, you're not perfect, but you understand how to make progress. So now you ask me, well, how am I going to perform if my performance is going to be impacted by things that I cannot control? Okay. Well, first of all, you be the same as everybody else. So understand that you're not alone for having to deal with things you cannot control. So if you benchmark against, other people of the same category, let's say a salesperson or same insurance sales or whatever, every policy the government, make or not make, economic things would affect them as much as they affect you, because generally that drives customer behavior. Okay. So I guess once you understand that, you stop feeling that you are the only victim in the world. And because everybody's the same, which is fair, then, okay, actually it's just down to the things that I can control again, because I can't control the things that I can't control. So what's the point in stressing over those, right? However, there's a difference in controlling those things you can't control versus understanding what those things are. There are two different things. My suggestion is that you should always look to improve the understanding of those things that you cannot control. Pay attention to, okay, so let's say a government policy has just been announced, okay? I would suggest that you spend a lot of time to read about it, to talk to people about it, to talk to your clients about it, to understand what it really does to the market, and then ultimately the customer behavior, so that you see what is coming. And then maybe, right, with all the other things that you can control, which is your knowledge, your relationship, maybe you can design something to fit in with this behavior that you are predicting is going to come. And therefore get ahead of the things that even if you can't control, you can begin to predict and maybe manage. Okay. So control is a very strong word, meaning that I want it the way I want it, 100%. That's control, right? I can't control it, but can I work with it? In order for me to work with it, I need to understand it. I need to understand the impact. I need to understand the consequence. I need to understand. So all of this requires a lot of work on your part to read, to talk to people, and generally just to think, right? And maybe you need other people to chime in as a team, because one person can only have that many ideas. So it's good to have a team of people who are like-minded and say, hey, what are the things that we can do together? So when it comes to the performance, I would say it is also about how curious are you and how up-to-date are you with things that you can't control, And how do you relate those things back to those you can control and make the best of it? Okay. Because your default position is, well, I can't control it. No one can. That's a default position. However, to get ahead means to perform well against the average person who's doing nothing about it. You're going to understand it and may be able to do something to your advantage because of what you know and what you understood.
And on that topic, right? So it's sometimes not necessarily a must to thrive, but as long as we maintain a certain performance level, let's say when other people are dropping their performance level, and if you can keep it, then you can still get ahead, right? Because it's a comparison, it's a relative thing. So sometimes maybe we can't thrive because there's a lot of things that we can't control. Let's say there's a crisis. Then how do we find ways to maintain the level? So not suffer a huge drop off when other people, when the industry is dropping off, right? So in that case, you still stand up, right? Does that work as well?
I would say similar things. Yeah. I mean, how do you optimize all the resources do you have around you to achieve the goal that you're trying to achieve, right? And here, what I mean is a lot of people underestimate the resource that they have access to. For example, if I talk to a student about, a particular question that they have, and I said, so what do you know about it? He said, oh, this, otherwise I don't know about it. And I said, okay, so what have you done to know more about it? What have you done up till now to research this? He said, oh, I just talked to people, went to the company website. But actually, what they could have done is to do a whole lot more search, let's say on Google, on YouTube, and there's a lot more accessible resources than they think that are related to that topic that they did not access. Very simply, for example, let's say you're a salesperson. You would think that, well, all my resources are, okay, whatever the company gives me, for example. Whatever the company product brochure says, that's my resources. Well, yes, but also you could look at what other company does. Maybe they have an idea that you haven't done. Maybe you can talk to another country, people working in other countries. How do they handle this kind of situation historically in the past, right? So within your network, are you really maximizing and optimizing all of the knowledge resource that is maybe nested within the network that you have no idea about until you ask, right? So to your point about, oh, I just wanted to maintain position, rather than fail, it's a relative concept, isn't it, Francis? So previous question was, how do I thrive when everybody was average? And now you're saying that how can I be average when everybody is below average? I think it's a similar idea. It's just making sure that you don't give up. You don't just well, you don't just leave things as they are just because well, it's outside of my control. There's nothing I can do. It's an attitude thing. I mean, I cannot guarantee you that if you've done the research that you can actually do better. But if you do the research, I think there is at least a possibility that you could be doing something different than others who are not. And that something different could then make a difference to your performance.
And if we get back to the fundamentals of the question, how
Yeah.
to maintain the performance level despite stress under high pressure work environment. So
Yeah.
I've seen different professions or different industry, they try to use something external to augment or to help guide the performance. So for example, in a surgery room, the situation is quite high pressure, right? Stressful, you have a lot of procedures and steps to do, and there's fine margin of error. So what they do is they have a checklist. So they have a list of things to do and they go through it step by step, just like in the pilot, right? Airplane, there are a lot of things to check, and they use a checklist, even though the pilots can rely on memory. But memory is not reliable, right? Even though you have been flying so many times, sometimes you still miss one or two, but that could be lethal, right, to the whole flight. So they perform a checklist, basically go through it, run down. Then these kind of external tools or checklists or even routines help at least minimize the uncertainty so that even we are under stress, we are able to perform at a minimum level. So, or at least minimize uncertainty or things that could go wrong. Yeah. So,
Oh, totally.
yeah.
Yeah.
But obviously, that's not for every single occupation and profession. So it depends on the type. Yeah. So, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, what you said is actually generally true. We call it the institutional knowledge. It may not come in the form of a spreadsheet or a checklist, but there is a formal handing down of the way to do things here, right? Because institutional knowledge is essentially historically, this institution has been developing and learning and figure things out. And for all those things that has worked, we want to retain those things as basically continuous wisdom to pass down to people so they don't start making the same mistake that we've made in the past. And we just progress, in a progressive way, avoiding all of the mistakes that previously made. And that's a very critical thing. So, and you see that a lot of the company has, training program, induction programs, and a lot of the training programs, even when, the place that what I work in banking, every 3 to 6 months, we have compliance training. And a lot of the training are repetitive in nature. So they just don't want you to forget. So they remind you every 3 to 6 months, very similar content, but they keep updating it. They give you examples of, 2 months ago, this thing happened to that bank. And then they tell you the whole story of how it happened and the reason why the problem exists. And they say, okay, then you answer questions and you say, okay, well, if this happened, what should you do? A, B, C, or D? And it's obvious the answer, right? But things like that reinforces key messages that they do not want you to forget. That is so important to learn from, well, either their own mistake or other people's mistake. And that is definitely one way to improve the quality of performance, amongst other things. But I think I forgot to talk about maybe the emotional element of all of this, which is maybe Kevin, you say, well, it's easier for you to say all of this, but I'm just not in an emotional state of mind to be emotionally stable and rationally engaged enough to peel off my emotional feelings. I can't even get out of bed to deal with this, right? So that would be a separate category of conversation, but essentially, I think a few things are important that are basic to this, regardless of what causes that stress. In my humble opinion, I think health is generally the bedrock of who we are, human well-being. So, and I'm not here to be a lecturer as to how people should live, right? However, things we eat, the things we drink, do we do any regular exercise, the time at which we go to bed, the time that we wake up, all plays a very important role because our body is linked to the cycle of nature. When the sun comes up and the sun goes down. And this has not really been stressed enough at any schools, in my humble opinion, about the importance of the natural cycle and how we should synchronize with the cycle. And modern society and social living seems to have shifted that cycle much later into the night than it is designed for. Okay. And so once people have chronically shifted their, let's say, sleeping pattern, that is ideally, maybe go to bed about 10:30 or 11 o'clock, but is now regularly at 2 o'clock, 1:30, 2 o'clock. The body clock and the associated repairs and maintenance process that the body is designed to perform gets out of synchronicity. And it creates then, let's say, a brain fog the next day when you wake up. Lethargy, you just don't want to go out anywhere, you don't want to do anything, and you start craving food that you really shouldn't be craving for, oily, greasy food, sweet drinks. And I'm not judging those food, but please be aware that there is a consequence when you consume those food and drinks. And those consequences do show up in your mental state. And if you understand this connection, you might want to do some experiments to check out to see if it does make a difference if you adjust your lifestyle a little bit. So that's what I wanted to point out.
Yeah, there's this whole cognitive capacity, and it's kind of like a computer, right? So you only have so much bandwidth, but if you start from a lower base because of sleep deprivation, because of whatever substance you intake, could be alcohol, could be other like bad, greasy, a lot of fat that compromise your health. That is the baseline health. Then you are left with less bandwidth or cognitive capacity to handle whatever situation. And there's even this narrative of sleeping less is something to be proud of, right? I think it's quite common in the corporate workplace that people take pride in sleeping a lot less, right? Oh, I just slept 2 hours, as if it's something to be proud of, and people should imitate when it's actually compromising your level, right? And I mean, there's also a phrase of busyness signals incompetence. So, I mean, if you go to the root cause, why people have to work overnight, it could be simply the workload or the nature of work, but there's something wrong if you have to burn midnight oil, right, to finish the work, either because you didn't work efficiently, or either you're just purely incompetent, so it takes a longer time to finish the work. So, but that's another topic for another day.
Yeah. And also, how productive do you use your time at work? And this is not a big topic. We can definitely talk about another day. But let's say the amount of time that you spend talking to colleagues, not about work, but about your frustrations at work, at the coffee room, at lunch. And this energy doesn't really help you perform at work. In fact, it does the opposite. You just go back to work and you feel frustrated. You have this resonance about this resistance to work because you just talk to another guy and he agrees, So you feel like misery love company, right? So
and there's
it's
the
kind of
echo
dangerous.
chamber from social media, right?
Yeah.
Like people go to forum, their social media account with their friends, or even like just private messaging. There's a group of people venting frustration for work. Like I've seen so many friends and people WhatsApp group that is just pure of toxic negativity, right? So yeah, but that's another topic. But any other final thoughts for how to perform? No,
No,
yeah, I think we
that's
can
good.
finish.
Yeah.
Yeah.